I watched a video by this apostate she's an ex-Muslim, and she addressed a few points about why she left Islam, and I thought, you know what, I am educated on this matter, so let me put in a few words. So this is not to address all the video that she made. This is just some two key points that I'm going to talk about. So she spoke about the testimony of women and why women were not put on the same esteem as men. And she also spoke about how women need to be veiled as if men were animals and they couldn't control their sexual urges. So inshallah, I'll address these 2 points. So firstly, this is going to be just a quick lesson on physiology, on female physiology, okay? This is about the cycle. So if we take a 28-day cycle, and this is just an average, right? The female cycle starts up at the brain. So you have part of the brain called the hypothalamus, and then that sends a signal down to a little gland called the pituitary gland, and then that gland also sends down these 2 hormones, and they go to the gonads, respectively, the ovaries, and then they tell them to release the egg. I want to speak to this topic from the perspective of, first of all, just mechanistic data and how things work, and then later on I'll give you some studies to prove what I'm saying. So, in the beginning, so this is after everything's been cleared, you have a surge in one of these 2 hormones that comes from the pituitary gland, and it goes and it signals the ovaries to release one of the eggs. Okay, the egg goes and implants itself into the endometrium, so ready to be fertilized by sperm, right? But in the beginning, you have the 2 primary female hormones. You have estrogens as a group, and progestins as a group. So we'll call them estrogen and progesterone just for simplicity's sake. In the beginning, the female is in her ovulatory phase, okay, where estrogen is predominating over progesterone, okay, and until you get to halfway through the cycle, so let's say 14 days in, that's when that egg transforms or becomes what's called the corpus luteum. That's when it hasn't been fertilized successfully, right? The corpus luteum in itself is also can be thought of as an endocrine gland because that in itself starts releasing progesterone, right? And then from that point on, progesterone predominates over estrogen. So if you guys just quickly have a Google of the female reproductive cycle or just the female hormone cycle, sorry, the menstrual cycle, not the reproductive cycle, you'll see hormones. Sometimes they put also testosterone because testosterone spikes a little bit at the time of ovulation. But generally, the first half, you have the ovulatory phase where the woman is predominant in estrogens and progestins are low. So high estrogen, low progesterone. Halfway through the cycle, then it switches because corpus luteum starts secreting progesterone. Then you have high progesterone and low estrogen. Now, what the hell am I talking about this? What's the significance of this? Well, we have receptors within our brain for these androgens and estrogens, okay? The androgens being the male hormones, yeah, testosterone and the such. And estrogens also influence our thinking, and progestins also to an extent, right? And these have not been studied very well, yeah? Because of the way that they interplay with other neurotransmitters is very complicated. But we know for a fact that they exert an effect, okay? Just take this, for example. If any of you guys know someone who takes exogenous steroids, right? If they take anabolic steroids, this whole idea of roid rage. There's some anecdotal evidence, albeit this is not scientifically rigorous, so to speak, by any stretch of imagination, but we know that these hormones influence our mind at a level, right? Now, why am I mentioning this? It's because we know that a woman in her ovulatory phase, as opposed to the exact same woman in her luteal phase, she thinks differently. The thought processes, the way she feels, is going to be altered within her mind, yeah? As opposed generally, within a man's supposed to have a relatively flat line testosterone level, right? And yes, there are secretions that go along with the circadian rhythm, but they're not very stark, and you don't have this flip between the luteal and the ovulatory phase, okay? So more or less stable flatline. Now, what does this mean? I'm just going to pull out a couple of studies here. So this is a study by Little and others titled Oral Contraceptive Use in Women Changes Preferences for Male Facial Masculinity and is Associated with Partner Facial Masculinity under the Journal of Psychoneuroendocrinology, right? I'm just going to read a quick excerpt of this. So, this is just in the summary. It says, our data provide the first experimental evidence that initiation of the pill use in women causes changes in facial preferences and documents downstream effects of these changes on real-life partner selection. Given that hormonal contraceptive use is widespread, effects of pill on the process of partner formation have important implications for relationship stability and may have other biological relevant consequences. Now, why am I saying this? The pill, what is the pill? Usually the combined oral contraceptive pill. It's a combination of both progestins and estrogens. And now this study is showing that it causes changes to the sexual preferences that a woman has. So we know right now, we don't know exactly the mechanism of how it does it, but we know that these pills and alterations in the hormones change the way we think. Okay? We become, so in this example, literally, the woman's preferences for a sexual mating partner essentially have changed. Okay? Changes you. Now, this is, I'm just quoting this from, this is abc.net. Now, this is ABC Science. I'm just going to read a quick excerpt again. The review of past studies found that pill use does indeed interfere with females' mate preferences throughout her monthly cycle. This is known. These hormones, they have an effect on the way we think. Okay, it changes the way we feel. Okay, very, very important. Now, how does this relate to what I was saying? She said she was talking about the testimony of females in context of Islam, right? Well, we are taking into account that woman in her first 14 days of the cycle, as opposed to second 14 days of the cycle, for all intents and purposes, is a different woman. She's not the same. She doesn't think the same. She doesn't feel the same. Okay, and what does that mean? Her judgment will be clouded. I'm saying this in an objective manner. The way she feels, the way she thinks, right? The person that she is, for all intents and purposes, is different depending on the part of the cycle she's in. Is she in her ovulatory or luteal phase? And how's that going to make her feel? And how's it going to influence what she says in her decisions, okay? This is not a matter of deficiency between males and females. This is just stating an objective fact that these hormones have an influence on the way we feel and therefore can cloud our judgment. I'm sure this is something that's accepted. Right? Inshallah, I'll explain this. Now, I can go further and elaborate, but I just want to jump onto the second point. She was talking about how males have this gaze and they're predatory and things like that. Well, they are. The blunt truth is we are. When we see a female, there are certain feelings that we have. The way we feel is very different to the way that a female sees us. Now, all the brothers watching this, they'll understand. They'll understand. This is not a joking matter. Now, how am I going to prove this to you scientifically? Because you will never understand how we feel. You won't understand how we feel when we see a female that's sexually inviting, yeah? I'm not saying this justifies the action for us to go and pursue and relieve ourselves in such a way, yeah? But there's a certain feeling, okay? The analogy that I use is, can you blame a lion for feeling a certain way if you were to wave just a steak in front of them? No, you'd be stupid if you thought that. Now, how would I go and prove this to you guys? This is a study by a researcher from a psychologist at Princeton University, Susan Fisk. Again, I'm just going to read the excerpt from this. So, it starts off by saying this. I'm just going to read this word for word, verbatim, okay? Sexy women in bikinis really do inspire some men to see them as objects, according to a new study of male behavior. Brain scans revealed that when men are shown pictures of scantily clad women, the region of the brain associated with tool use lights up. Men were also more likely to associate images of sexualized women with first-person action verbs such as I push, I grasp, I handle, said lead researcher Susan Fisk, a psychologist at Princeton University. And in a shocking finding, Fisk noted some of the men studied showed no activity in the part of the brain that usually responds when a person ponders another's intentions. This means that these men see women as sexually inviting, but they are not thinking about their minds, Fisk said. The lack of activation in this social cognition area is really odd because it hardly ever happens. The woman more sexually inviting, if she is a more sexually inviting woman, it makes the part of the brain that is usually associated with tool use activate in men. Not only that, the part of the brain where we want to ponder another person's intentions. So, meaning, when I see another person, there's a person in front of it, correct? Oh no, what are they thinking? What's going through that? That shuts off. So we start seeing tools. Now, is this right or wrong? It's not a matter of right or wrong. This is just an objective observation. This is what happens in men. This is what happens in men. You need to understand this is not something we choose. This is just the reality of things. Why do you not accept it? And you go speak to these women, you tell them, it's, wallah, it's best for you, do this, it's best for you, but they don't understand. I'm trying to include some scientific study just so we can remain objective, yeah? Because this is not my subjective view that, oh, only if I were to see a woman dressed in a certain way, then only I have this. No, this is universal across men, okay? We're talking about just the general, healthy, straight oriented man, okay? And inshallah, I've cleared up some of these points, but it's just very frustrating when people speak and they're ignorant. They don't know about these things. So, inshallah, I've clarified some of these things, and Allah knows best. But yeah, that's what I suppose I had to get these points off my mind. And if this benefited anyone, so be it. If it hasn't, so be it as well. But Allah knows my intentions. And wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.